Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Kim Min-ji and Chang Ana. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. We're going to start things off with President Yoon and his three-nation tour in Central Asia. We talked about his first stop in Turkmenistan. He is now in his second stop over in Kazakhstan. It is there that President Yoon held summit talks with Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev on this Wednesday, and the two leaders signed a series of agreements aimed at strengthening the strategic partnership between the two nations. The agreement also spans various fields, including the critical minerals, supply chain, energy cooperation, and infrastructure development. Looking for some win-win deals here. Minji, start us off. Tell us more about the summit between the two leaders.
Sure. So in a summit held in Astana, South Korean President Yoon and Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev agreed to collaborate extensively on supply chain for critical minerals. This partnership will cover all stages from exploration and development to commercialization. The leaders signed a memorandum of understanding, paving the way for comprehensive cooperation on critical minerals, combining Kazakhstan's abundant resources with South Korea's advanced technology. This collaboration is crucial for South Korea's chip and battery manufacturers, given Kazakhstan's vast reserves of uranium, chromium, titanium, and rare earth metals. Additional MOUs were signed for a joint exploration and development of lithium mines and commercialization of rare metals. These agreements aim to cover the entire cycle of key minerals, given Korean companies' priority in developing economically viable minerals. Moreover, the two nations committed to working together in areas such as climate change, technology, education, tourism, and people-to-people exchanges. Now, during the summit, President Yoon introduced Seoul's K-Silk Road Cooperation Initiative, which seeks to link South Korea's innovative capabilities with Central Asia's resources and development potential. Now, this initiative was announced ahead of President Yoon's Central Asia tour, which includes visits to Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. The summit also addressed the security situation on the Korean Peninsula, including North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Both countries agreed to continue supporting international efforts to condemn North Korea's nuclear development and block its illegal funding.
President Yoon Suk-yeol also on Wednesday said that they will discuss concrete cooperation measures to further upgrade the strategic partnership with Kazakhstan. Hannah, you have more on this.
Sure. Now, Yoon said at a meeting with compatriots at a hotel in the capital Astana that Central Asia, including Kazakhstan, is an important area of cooperation for us as we aim to become a global center of gravity. Now, Yoon, who arrived in Kazakhstan on Wednesday after a state visit to Turkmenistan, will hold a summit with President Tokayev on Thursday. Now, Yoon also said that ahead of my trip, I announced the Korea Central Asia K-Silk Road Cooperation Initiative and the government's first diplomatic strategy for Central Asia, which embodies our vision of opening a new era of cooperation with Central Asia for freedom, peace, and prosperity. He also added that Korean compatriots in Kazakhstan is respected as an exemplary ethnic minority and is a strong link between Korea and Kazakhstan, and that we will further promote communication between Korean organizations in Central Asia and Korean groups in Korea, and actively support networking between Korean businesses in Kazakhstan and Korean businesses in Korea. Yoon also promised to expand training programs to bring the next generation of Korean compatriots to their home country. Now, he said that the geopolitical and geoeconomic significance of Central Asia is growing, and that he urges that the Korean compatriots to help Korea and Central Asia continue their cooperation in energy, minerals, infrastructure, and digital culture.
That's right. That is one thing that we often don't mention too much about when it comes to Kazakhstan, is that there are a lot of ethnic Koreans who reside there. And from what I understand, there are now a number of international studies departments in South Korean universities, colleges where they have all English majors or departments, right? Like, for example, Yonsei has the Underwood College, right? And so other schools. And many students from Kazakhstan actually come to South Korea to study here for 4 years to get their 4-year college education here in South Korea. And there's always been quite a bit of exchange, people-to-people exchanges between the two countries, whether it be through education or through culture. And we could certainly see things like this. And for one understanding, there's also, I believe, a program, or there was a program where they allow some of the ethnic Koreans in Kazakhstan visit here in South Korea. Like it's all paid for by the government and so forth. And so a lot of, there's a lot of great deal of emphasis on the people-to-people exchange. And, not only are we going to talk about, the usual critical energy cooperation and things like that, but we've always been quite fond of the soft power of Korea, right? Let's move on here. I certainly didn't feel it, although I was crazy startled by the blaring of the alarms from the cell phone. This is because South Korea experienced probably the biggest quake in the Korean Peninsula this year. This is a 4.8 magnitude earthquake that struck the Buan County in Jeollabuk-do province early this morning, just after 8 a.m. And this is, again, I guess comparatively to some of the bigger quakes that are reported in, let's say, Turkey and like Syria or like in Japan, it's nothing compared to that. However, South Korea not used to seismic activity this big. And in fact, this is the 16th strongest since 1978 when the seismic monitoring began. Minji, tell us more about this.
Well, according to the Korea Meteorological Administration, the KMA, today's 4.8 magnitude earthquake near Buan-gun in Jeollabuk-do province is the strongest to have occurred in South Korea and its surrounding waters this year. And it is also the 16th strongest earthquake recorded since 1973 when record-keeping began. Now, the quake's depth was measured at 8 kilometers and was followed by 15 aftershocks as of 2 p.m. The aftershocks were felt in various regions, including Seoul, Incheon, Gyeonggi-do province, Chungcheongnam-do and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces, Gyeongsang-nam-do and Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces, Busan, Daegu, and Ulsan. An emergency disaster alert was issued across the country about 9 seconds after the event was detected.
Yeah, you might be wondering, for our listeners tuning in overseas, how an earthquake of that size can be felt in so many different parts of the country. We forget that South Korea, geographically, it's a very small country. It's not a big country. I remember a couple of years back, there was an earthquake in Gangwon province, and we felt it here in the studio to the point where the speakers up there were shaking a bit, and it startled all of us towards the end of the program. I didn't feel it. I don't know if any of you guys felt the quake in Seoul or any of the regions, but it is widespread. Minji, tell us how the public reacted to the earthquake and what kind of measures have been taken to ensure safety of the people around there.
So the National Fire Agency reported a total of 213 calls nationwide regarding the quake as of 9:21 a.m. And although there were reports of property damages, such as cracks forming on walls, there have been no reports of casualties or injuries. And of these reports, 77 came from Jeollabuk-do province, where Buan-gun is located. And one report was also filed from Wonju, Gangwon-do province, approximately 300 kilometers from Buan. And importantly, no damage has been reported at any of the nuclear or hydroelectric plants across the nation, and all are operating safely according to Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. And following the earthquake, the Ministry of Interior and Safety raised the alert level of the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters to level 1, the lowest in the government's 3-tier emergency alert system. And a separate earthquake alert was issued at the vigilance level, the 3rd highest in the 5-tier system. Now, President Yoon has instructed the government to conduct a swift damage assessment and safety check in response to the earthquake, and he also emphasized the importance of providing accurate information to the public in order to prevent anxiety about possible aftershocks.
That's right. Again, luckily, it wasn't big enough that it caused any major damages, although there were some video footages of what it was like in the nearby areas. And there was quite a bit of shaking, but 4.8 magnitude, again, we're not used to things like this. And I think a couple of years back, we were talking to an expert in regards to earthquakes. There's actually a large number of small earthquakes that happen all the time here in South Korea, but apparently the frequency has been going up quite a bit, and now the country is prone to bigger ones. We're so used to all these smaller ones like magnitude 1, 2. As high, I think the highest we saw this year before that was like 3 point something, but 4 point something, close to 5. It's pretty big if you consider South Korea and the history of seismic activity here. We're going to move on here. Following the announcement by Seoul National University Hospital earlier, we had other big 5 hospitals who announced that they're going to be taking a leave next Tuesday. Now, the Medical Professors Association of Korea has also announced that it will follow the decision of the Korean Medical Association, or KMA. So more universities are expected to follow suit. Hannah, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. But now, in reality, it is said that it is unlikely that professors will leave the hospitals in large numbers on the exact day of the 18th due to the short time left to reschedule patient surgeries and outpatient appointments. Now, according to the medical community on Tuesday, Seonggyunggwan University, University of Ulsan College of Medicine, and Catholic University of Korea voted to take a leave of absence on the 18th, and the training hospitals for these universities will be closed. Now, the university plans to disclose the specific voter participation rate on the 12th, which is today, and Severance Hospital has already agreed to close its doors, so the big 5 hospitals have joined the call. Now, more hospitals are expected to follow suit. The Korean Medical Association held a regular general meeting on the afternoon of the 12th today to decide whether or not to participate in taking a day off announced by the Medical Professors Association of Korea, and of course discuss future measures. And 11 medical schools belonging to the association effectively concluded that they will collectively close on the 18th and began collecting internal opinions on the duration and method of the closure. Now, an official from the association said that as a result of the consultation, there are some universities that are close to 80 to 90% in favor of participating in the move. Hospitals are planning to close except for personnel in charge of essential medical care, such as emergency rooms and intensive care units, but patient anxiety is bound to grow as scheduled surgeries are postponed. However, it is unlikely that many professors will actually leave the hospital. With only less than a week to go before the notice, it is not easy to reschedule patient appointments. Nevertheless, professors of the Catholic University of Korea and Seoul St. Mary's Hospital decided to take a leave on the 18th to show their will to protest, and professors at 3 hospitals affiliated with Yonsei Medical Center, which is Severance Hospital, Gangnam Severance Hospital, and Yongin Severance Hospital, are taking an indefinite leave of absence from the 27th of this month in protest against the government.
So even though we mention Seoul National University Hospital, right, it's not just one hospital. The Seoul National University Hospitals, there are 4 affiliated hospitals, so they're all going to be impacted by this. And now all the big 5 hospitals in Seoul are going to try to figure out what they're going to do with the decisions here. The big problem right now is we talked about the 3+ months of the residents and interns who've walked out of their jobs. And so if you go to these hospitals, the only ones that are treating the patients are the professors. When we say professors, we're not just talking about like teaching professors. We're talking about they're senior doctors, right? Who also double as professor. They have the title as a professor. And so it's these professors and senior doctors who are actually treating a lot of the doctors instead of the interns and residents who, by the way, do the most of the jobs. Like if you've ever been to the hospital, it's usually the trainee doctors, and rarely in like big cases, like big surgeries, you have the professors and so forth. And now, if it's only the professors who are in these hospitals, and now they're going to have a leave of absence, who's going to treat the patients is the big thing, right? The all outpatients, then you were saying, is going to be shut off. I know that they're going to say that, I know they said that they're probably going to treat the inpatient and emergency surgeries and things like that. But already, because of the vacuum, due to the walkout of the trainee doctors, surgeries are being delayed. It's so difficult to schedule a surgery, apparently these days. Only emergency cases are allowed to do this. And so we'll have to see what happens here and how the government plans to respond to the measures here by the professors here. Let's talk economy here. Some updates on the employment trends here in South Korea. I got the latest data from the Statistics Korea saying that the increase in the number of employed people last month was the smallest in 39 months. Now, they're saying the slowdown is largely attributed to the inclusion of holidays in the survey period, although not many holidays, and I don't know how that really does attribute to it. But the unemployment rate has continued to rise, especially among the young people, with the government citing more active job hunting post-pandemic as a key factor. Minji, let's get the details of this.
Sure. So according to data compiled by Statistics Korea, the number of employed people in South Korea came to 28.92 million in May, an increase of 80,000 from a year earlier. And this marks the fewest on-year job additions since February 2021, when the country shed 473,000 positions amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And in comparison, April saw 261,000 new jobs following 173,000 new positions in March, with January and February each surpassing the 300,000 level in job additions. Now, the sharp decline in the number of new jobs in May is partly attributed to the inclusion of the Buddha's birthday holiday in the survey period, and the impact has been quite varied across different age groups and sectors. Now, the number of jobs for those aged 15 to 29 dropped by 173,000, the largest fall since January 2021, and the employment rate for this age group rose to 6.7%, an increase of 0.9 percentage points, marking the largest increase since February 2021. And additionally, people in their 40s had 114,000 fewer positions last month. However, there were increases in employment for older age groups. Jobs for those aged 60 and older rose by 265,000 on year, while those in their 30s and 50s saw increases of 74,000 and 27,000 jobs respectively. By sector, the manufacturing sector added 38,000 jobs, continuing its growth for the sixth consecutive month due to rising exports. The accommodation and dining sector also saw a gain of 80,000 new positions in May, marking the third straight monthly increase. On the other hand, the wholesale and retail sector lost 73,000 positions, and the construction sector saw a decrease of 47,000 jobs.
Yeah, you're going to continue to see a decrease in the construction side because there's not a lot of building construction of apartment complexes right now because of the stagnant real estate market. But it's concerning. Again, I mean, we talked about this. I mean, we could boast about 265,000 jobs added for those in their 60s. But that tells you two things. Number one, those are part-time jobs. Those are the small jobs that the younger population aren't willing to take up. And also it shows that if you have to work past your 60s when it's near your retirement age, really shows you the status of the elderly population here in South Korea. But it is concerning when you're saying those from 15 to 29, that's like the most active, right? This is when you're seeking jobs, right? And you're looking at the largest drop here. Unemployment rate rising 6.7%. That's massive figures here. But again, if you're going to look at this glass half full, right? You can still say, well, at least there are some jobs being added. For example, those in their 30s, right? I'm in my 30s, and you can also argue that those in their 30s are the most active in the economy. Those in their 50s are seeing an increase. I think that you're seeing a dip in the 40s, which is also kind of concerning here. Right. So mixed picture here. But Minji, what about the overall unemployment rate and some of the other key statistics?
Well, the employment rate for people aged 15 to 64 increased by 0.1 percentage point on year to 70% in May, the highest level for any May since 1989 when the agency began compiling relevant data. However, the number of unemployed rose by 97,000 to 884,000 in May, and the jobless rate increased by 0.3 percentage point to 3%. And an official from Statistics Korea noted that the unemployed people refers to those who do not have a job but have actively sought one. So there has been a growing number of people trying to land a job after the pandemic, which is contributing to the rise in the unemployment rate.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, if you look at the bigger age range of 15 to 65, which is the working age, right? After 64, it's, you're retired, although I think there are some people who are trying to work past 64. And the vast majority of the jobs being added are those 60 and above. So 60 through 64 is the vast majority here, right? When you're talking about 265,000 jobs being added here, and it's an increase of 0.1% despite all the declines in job figures for the younger age groups. That shows you something. It shows that there's really, it's difficult to get jobs right now. I don't know how it's like in other countries right now, but that's why we keep seeing the NEET tribe, right? To not in education or what is it? Employment or training, right? And they just given up. But at least they're seeking jobs. Let's move on here. U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Philip Goldberg on Wednesday said that the U.S. is ready for anything that happens here in the Korean Peninsula. And this is in response to the escalating tensions between the two Koreas, including North Korea's sending of balloons carrying trash, and of course the subsequent response from South Korea with the resumption of the loudspeaker campaign in the border areas. Hannah, let's get more on this.
Sure. Now, speaking at a talk hosted by the U.S. think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies, Goldberg stressed that North Korea is so unpredictable that we, the United States, will never lower our defense posture against North Korea. Now, the U.S. is discussing the full range of military and security policies to make sure that the South Korean government and its people are reassured about the U.S.'s commitments. And Goldberg added that the U.S. commander of U.S. forces, Korea, and the U.S. embassy in Seoul follow developments between the two Koreas hourly. He also added that the 28,500 U.S. troops in South Korea are a testament to our long-term security commitment and that we will fully support our ally South Korea in all of these matters. After criticizing North Korea's trash balloon launches as outrageous and highly counterproductive. Now, it is only right that South Korea and President Yoon's government take steps to demonstrate that they will do everything they can to deter such provocations, is what he said. However, Goldberg was also cautiously concerned about the escalating tensions between the two Koreas. He said that we believe in freedom of expression, of course, but referring to the leafletting of North Korea by South Korean civilian organizations, which North Korea has cited as a reason for releasing these trash balloons. But he said that we understand that we need to de-escalate tensions, not escalate them. And he also said that what makes the current tensions different from the past is the dynamic of the strengthening of North Korea-Russian relations and North Korea's management of its relations with China, and that the U.S. hopes to see some caution on that front. Goldberg also mentioned he was not concerned about the trilateral summit held late last month in Seoul, saying that it was a natural process as they tried to manage their relationship with China in the same way that we are doing with China.
You can't blame South Korea for having a trilateral summit with China and Japan when the U.S. and China continue to have these high-level bilateral talks. Almost on a monthly basis, they're doing this. And this is the importance of dialogue, trying to quell tensions. Unfortunately, we're unable to quell the tensions between the two Koreas because there's a lack of dialogue. I mean, there's no military hotline that's operating. There's no, North Korea going, yes, we're willing to sit down and start talking, hold negotiations or anything like that. This is why tensions are flaring up all the more right now. The long-standing territorial dispute that we've always talked about between South Korea and Japan. This is the one thing that's preventing the two countries from fully, healing the bilateral relations. Japan launched a renewed protest against South Korea's marine survey activities near the Dokdo islets. Remember, there has been some sources that there might be some vast oil and gas mines near Pohang. And Japan basically said that, what are you doing in our territory? You can't be doing this without our permission, which, again, false territorial claims over the region overall. South Korea has firmly rejected these protests. Minji, let's get more on this.
Sure. So South Korea, as SJ has said, has rejected Japan's renewed protest against Seoul conducting a marine survey in waters off the Dokdo Islets and the East Sea. According to Japan's foreign ministry, a South Korean research vessel carried out a marine survey again on Tuesday, about a week after a previous survey, in treating what Japan claims to be its exclusive economic zone around the Dokdo Islets. Namazo Hiroyuki, head of the ministry's Asian and Oceanian Affairs Bureau, communicated communicated Japan's opposition to the research activity to a senior diplomat from the South Korean embassy in Tokyo, calling for an immediate halt to the survey. Similarly, the Japanese embassy in Seoul lodged a protest with the South Korean Foreign Ministry. However, an official from the South Korean Foreign Ministry dismissed Japan's protest, stating that Dokdo is South Korea's own territory, historically, geographically, and by international law. And the official emphasized that no sovereignty claims to Dokdo by Japan can be accepted. The official further added that the South Korean government rejected Japan's protest against the research activity and plans to firmly respond to Japan's unjust claims to South Korea's Dokdo islets.
Again, I mean, we see this on an annual basis. It used to be that it was every year when they released their diplomatic blue book that they make these false claims over Dokdo islets, but now it's happening actually more than once per year. They've also released their diplomatic blue book not too long ago, made their false claims over Dokdo islets. They had their so-called Takashima Day. I think, what was it? I think it's April, like May, that they have this every year. And they start celebrating on a day that's not even, on an island that's not even, part of their territory. And so all of this is not really helping things out and kind of raises the question, is the bilateral relations between Seoul and Japan fully healed? Things like this certainly shows that it's not. Speaking of bilateral relations, we talked about how South Korea and Cuba, for the first time, established its first official diplomatic ties here. Well, the senior diplomats of the two countries held talks earlier today, and this is the first talks since the establishment of the bilateral relations earlier this year. Hannah, let's get more on this.
Sure. Now, Deputy Foreign Minister Chung Byung-won met one-on-one with Carlos Pereira, the Director General for Bilateral Affairs at the Cuban Foreign Ministry, on Wednesday today. Now, in his first official meeting with his South Korean counterpart, Pereira said they would discuss bilateral relations, but not North and South relations, and only issues specific to the South Korean the government. Now, Pereira is leading a government delegation to South Korea for the first time since the establishment of diplomatic ties between Cuba and South Korea in February, and is on a trip that includes the 2024 Forum on Future Cooperation between South Korea and Latin America. Now, the follow-up to the diplomatic ties and practical cooperation are expected to be high on the agenda. Now, Cuban government officials said it is possible to open a diplomatic mission in South Korea as early as within this month, or a month. And he said that we can open an embassy as soon as possible after completing the necessary procedures. And Pereira told reporters on Tuesday after attending this forum in Seoul. Now, South Korea and Cuba agreed to set up permanent missions in each other's countries after establishing diplomatic relations in February this year. A counselor from the Cuban embassy in China has been traveling to South Korea since last month to work on the opening of the mission. However, it is said that the site for the mission has not yet been finalized, making it physically difficult to open the mission in a month's time. And analysts believe that Pereira's remarks are an expression of his desire to speed up the process. Pereira attended the forum as the head of the first government delegation to South Korea since the establishment of diplomatic relations with Cuba in February. And speaking at a session later in the day on expanding sectorial and practical cooperation tailored to the needs of people's livelihoods and job creation, he said that South Korea has ranked third or fourth among Cuba's trading partners in the Asia-Pacific region over the past 5 years and has a broad potential for cooperation. He said that Cuba can cooperate with Korea in the fields of minerals, renewable energy, agriculture, and etc., and it also see potential for cooperation in the fields of economy, finance, and investment, adding that Cuba has a good foundation for bilateral relations, so both can take advantage of various stages of cooperation. He also said that we want to offer exportable Cuban products to the Korean people, as K-pop and Korean dramas are particularly popular in Cuba. And he added that he hopes that the number of 14,000 Korean tourists who visited Cuba at the end of 2015 will recover and more tourists would visit Cuba.
wonder if we could start purchasing Cuban cigars. Those are Americans can't buy Cuban cigars. It's banned, and I've heard great things about that. Although I never like the smell, to be honest with you. I don't know if any of our listeners have ever visited Cuba before, but I've met several people who have gone there. They said it was beautiful. It's a must-visit place, but they're saying that I knew some Koreans that went to Cuba. They said the one thing that you don't want to do when you go to Cuba, now you can do well, don't do it, but lose your passport. Before, because there wasn't an embassy there, right? There wasn't a mission there. So if you lose your passport, it was very, very difficult for you to somehow get a temporary emergency passport and all that stuff. But now if they're able to establish this, and I think they're going to be establishing a temporary mission over in Havana for the time being before they set up a permanent one, like Hannah mentioned there. But it's going to make things a lot easier. And as all of you guys know, when you're visiting overseas, losing your passport is like one thing that you dread, right? We're going to move on here. South Korea's second Vice Foreign Minister Kang In-sun will be attending a crucial conference in Berlin. This from actually taking place right now as we speak. Conference focuses on the reconstruction and restoration of Ukraine, a country that's been significantly impacted and damaged, basically, by the ongoing conflict. Tell us more about this, Minji.
Sure. So South Korean second Vice Foreign Minister Kang In-sun is attending a conference on Ukraine's recovery from yesterday and today in Berlin, Germany. And during the regular briefing on June 11th, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Im Su-seok stated South Korea will continue to join the international community's efforts to rebuild and restore Ukraine by participating in the conference. Now, at the meeting, Kang will emphasize the international community's solidarity and support for Ukraine. And additionally, she will introduce the implementation status of the Ukraine Peace and Solidarity Initiative, which South Korea announced last year. Now, furthermore, at the ministerial meeting of the Donor Coordination Platform for Ukraine, the MDCP, South Korea will reiterate its commitment to contributing to Ukraine's reconstruction as a new member. The MDCP, launched in January of last year, is a consultative group of key donors to Ukraine, including the Group of Seven, the European Commission, Ukraine, and international financial organizations such as the World Bank. Now, South Korea joined as a new member in February. Now, this marks the third year that South Korean government has participated in meetings on Ukraine's recovery.
Yeah, and there's a number of companies, South Korean companies, who've, I think, signed like MOUs or something in the reconstruction projects. And there was I forgot which company it was. So there was one company that's not well known. It's not like KT or anything like that. But I believe they signed some sort of an agreement in establishing the telephone lines once again in Ukraine, and it's going to certainly help that company. And I think there's going to be a lot of businesses amongst the donor countries, companies that are going to try to go in there and take part in the reconstruction project. We're going to move on here. The Group of Seven Summit, the G7 Summit, is actually kicking off on Thursday local time over in Italy. South Korea, not invited this time around. Hannah, let's get the details of the upcoming event.
Sure. Now, the G7 is a group of industrialized countries that dominate global trade and the international financial system, including the US, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Japan. It was once expanded to G8 when Russia became an official member in 1998, but was ousted in 2014 following its forcible annexation of Ukraine's Crimea and returned to the G7. China has never been an official member of the G7, despite having a huge economy and the world's second largest population. The EU is not a member of the G7, but attends the summit every year. Now, this year's summit is expected to focus on Ukraine, Gaza, Africa, migration, economic security, and international cooperation on AI. A major concern is whether an agreement can be reached on how to use the roughly $300 billion in Russian assets frozen since the war in Ukraine to support Ukraine. Now, the U.S. has proposed to the G7 and EU that a $50 billion loan program be created using the interest from frozen Russian central bank assets as collateral. However, the G7 has yet to reach a final agreement due to disagreements over the exact form of disbursement and repayment guarantees. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that this is a top top priority for the U.S. and that we believe it's a priority for the entire G7 nations. The EU also appears to be broadly supportive of the U.S. proposal, provided that it is prepared for the risks such as repayment guarantees. Now, the EU had already confirmed last month that it would use some $4.4 trillion a year in revenue from frozen Russian assets in the region to support Ukraine's military, and it is understood to believe that a G7-wide agreement could lead to even greater financial support for Ukraine immediately. Now, the summit will be attended by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will seek to sign a bilateral security agreement with U.S. President Joe Biden. And the Russian-Ukrainian war will also be discussed at a Ukraine-related peace conference in Switzerland on the 15th to 16th this month following the G7 summit. And compared to last year's meeting in Hiroshima, Japan, the agenda related to China is likely to be less prominent at this year's G7 summit. Instead, Italy, this year's G7 chair, will focus on African issues linked to its own migrant crisis. The Italian Prime Minister believes that political and economic stability in Africa is essential to stem the tide of migrants flowing from Africa to Europe and is asking the G7 for financial support for Africa. To this end, the Prime Minister plans to invite a significant number of African leaders to the G7 summit for an expanded meeting. And Pope Francis will also be the first pope to attend the G7 summit, and the Pope will speak at the G7 summit session on AI. Now, he has warned that the growing importance of AI could become a source of anxiety that threatens world peace, so he is continuously warning the dangers of AI, and he will be speaking at the G7.
I have to say, this is the most unlikely sentence I've ever seen. The Pope will speak at the G7 summit session on artificial intelligence. It's unfortunate that South Korea hasn't been invited to this. Very quickly here, because this is some concerning news, Russian and Belarusian forces have begun the second phase of tactical nuclear weapon exercises over in Russia. Minji, let's get the latest on this.
Well, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, Russian and Belarusian troops have started the second stage of drills to practice the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons. This stage involves joint training for the combat use of non-strategic nuclear weapons following threats that Moscow claims are coming from Western powers. Now, the second stage announced on Tuesday includes joint training of Russian and Belarusian units for the combat use of non-strategic nuclear weapons. Now, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov emphasized the importance of these exercises.
All right, there you have it. We'll give you guys more updates on that when it does develop. Guys, thank you very much for your updates. Have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.